get yourself a permit so that you can travel to us, whether you're outside of South Africa, outside of KZN or in KZN. Okwamanje ngenxa yesimo se-lockdown asikwazi ukuthatha ama-patients Australia, New Zealand, and so on and so forth. You have to be within South Africa. So today we are going to be talking about the underlying spirituality of rituals. And for those of you that have been following us, you will understand that I've said spirituality is the foundation of culture. Culture is there for the sole purpose of nurturing our spirits. Okay? So culture is the execution of cultural practice, is a form of spiritual nourishment. That's what it's there for. So we need to begin to understand culture from a spiritual perspective and not necessarily an obligation perspective. Ungenzi into ngoba ugogo nomkhulu bathe enze lokho. Ungenzi into ngoba ubaba nomama bathe enze lokho. Okay. So let's just go into today's lecture. As usual, looking back on where we're coming from, we've spoken about the fundamentals. Sakhuluma ngesibongo ukuthi isibongo silungiswa kanjani, and then I spoke about isibongo when it comes to assisted conception. Another great lecture in which we talked about a very 21st century kind of topic, looking at it using African culture and African spirituality. Then furthermore, we went on sabheka ukuthi kahle mase lenkinga lesibongo iqala nokhokho nogogo nomkhulu ilungiswa kanjani. How do we fix something that has come from our great-grandparents and our grandparents? And then sakhuluma indaba udawula makhosi, the twins, nemimoya, and I introduced you into the three types, the third law of African spirituality, the types of imimoya, and looking at how to understand your spiritual identity, because that will then determine how you will be healed, how you will be treated, and how you should be initiated should you be called to uthwasa. We then went on to Ukuzalwa sakhuluma ngesintu neBhayibheli and uNkulunkulu and the three different layers, and I introduced you to the triangle, the multi-layered triangle of spiritual connectivity. And then last week we looked at sex, gender, and sexuality, looking at the underlying spirituality behind homosexuality, behind being a lesbian, behind being gay, queer, intersex, transgender, and just to get a better understanding of that. So this week we are looking at rituals, and I know a lot of you are hoping for rituals to have come earlier on in the lecture series, but the reason I'm putting rituals now is because, like I said in the beginning of this lecture, we need to change our perspective, or rather our understanding of African culture. And for me to do that, I need to get you to look at culture with the lens of spirituality and not the lens of obligation, and not the lens of social construct, and not the lens of history or identity. Okay, so for that to happen, I need to take you through the processes to get you to think differently about culture. So if you had followed my lecture series from 1 up until now, I can guarantee you now, you're thinking very differently. You're not thinking about culture the same way. And I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping that we're getting there. So today we're going to be introducing a new law, the 8th law of African spirituality. As usual, I'm going to give you homework for the kind of family history we need to go back and find, kind of conversations we're going to be having with our family after this lecture. I'm going to speak about today something that's going to lead on to the next one: aim, objective, goals, and purpose. It's going to make sense when I tuck into it. Then we're going to look at Imbeleko, we're going to look at Umhlonyane, we're going to look at Umemulo, and then we'll look at the spiritual trifecta and the cogs of spiritual liberation and expression. I know it seems airy-fairy now, it doesn't make sense, but we're going to tuck into it and it's going to make sense. Okay. So those of you that have been following us, please guys, if you haven't and this is the first time joining, please take some time to go through the previous lecture series. They're on our website, they're on our YouTube channel. And it's quite important to understand how these laws of African spirituality have come about and why they actually come about, because they're each tied to a particular lecture. That's 1 through 5. Today, last week, we spoke about 6 and 7, that spiritual oppression or suppression of another spiritual being is detrimental to your own liberation. Number 7, social constructs are of our plane, and they do not come from the ancestral plane. Okay? And that means Abadala don't recognize our social constructs. So the social construct, Uguti, a man cannot wear heels. That is a social construct. Abadala don't recognize that. The social construct that men love sports and women love to cook. Abadala don't. That doesn't apply to them. That's what we have decided on this plane of being in the living that is most appropriate. That's what we've decided to be most appropriate, right? Today, I want to speak about physical maturation and spiritual maturation. Physical maturation, right? Physically maturing must be accompanied by the spirit maturing as well. Okay. So as one physically matures, right, and you have those markers, you need to spiritually recognize the maturing process as well. And itongo as well must be matured with the individual's body. Let me explain. Okay. So our homework for this lecture, I want us to really look at our family's history when it comes to practicing rituals. I understand some of you are pioneers and you're not really sure. That's why you're here. That's fine. That's great. But let's look at what kind of rituals typically took place in the home for a child, for an adult, for a birthday, for a wedding. What kind of rituals were done? How often were they done? Did we do it in the 5th and 4th generation and then we stopped in the 3rd? And if we stopped, who stopped it and for what reason did they stop it? Some people stop practicing African culture because they find the church and they say, look, we're going to be in that particular church because that particular church says, no, we cannot consult the dead, nor can we practice African culture. Hence, we are stopping. You need to know all of them, but you need to know what's Ilipi Sagwazi that made that decision for us to stop as a family practicing African culture. Are you the first in the family to engage in the African cultural and spiritual world? You need to find that out because some of you are like I said, you guys are the pioneers and you need to know if you're the pioneers, right? And if you're not the pioneer, right? And if you are the pioneer and you know that your great grandmother and you know her name because you've done the family tree history, she was the one that fought for the family to continue, but at that point they stopped. You know who to call upon for strength. You know who to call upon for guidance. You know who to call upon for clarity when it comes to bringing the family back. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So today I want to begin by speaking about, because last week when we last left off, I spoke about how God determines the aim, right? And then in order to achieve an aim, you have many objectives. In order to achieve an objective, right, there are goals you need to reach. Okay. So we have the aim initially, right? So God is going to say, this is the aim of the Black race as a whole. This is the aim of humanity as a whole. The objectives are then broken down, right? And then each family will be designated a particular objective, right? And then Abadala Bona will take this objective given to them by God, break it up into smaller goals, right? Make it into small bite-sized pieces small goals that need to be reached. And then in order for each of these goals to be reached, a particular individual, right, must do something, right? The particular individual must carry out umsebenzi othize with the sole purpose of achieving that goal. I hope that makes sense. So in other words, I'm going to use my family as an example. Our objective would be, right, change the way I want to understand or make a substantial contribution to African spirituality and African culture in Africa, right? That is our objective, right? Maybe our objective is to start Umhlonyane Institute. That's our objective. We then break it up into smaller goals, right? And then each tongue or netongo is going to be given a particular purpose, right? Purpose. Because each purpose is for a particular goal, right? Dr. Mkiza, let's take Dr. Mkiza. Maybe the person that is in him, his purpose has the goal, create the organization, found the organization. Okay. Now, if you look on the right there, right? In order for your job, which is at the bottom, to become a craft, and your craft then has meaning, and your craft then serves the purpose, right? You need to have indigenous spiritual knowledge and wisdom. That is when you are no longer just a GP, or you are no longer just a neurosurgeon, or let's use a political analyst. You're not a political analyst anymore. But that element of Ubai Sanusi, where you can see ahead in the future, has been activated. So once you've been activated, that element of Ubai Sanusi in you, and you're a political analyst, you not only are your predictions with the political landscape and the future political landscape based on your education and experience, but there is a third eye that is contributing to your work. So now your job that third eye has taken your job and made it a craft. And now your craft has meaning. And now that meaning is serving purpose. So now you're no longer just waking up every single day and earning a salary so that you can put food on the table, but you are serving or fulfilling the purpose that is necessary. And then once you fulfill your purpose, you reach your goal, and you help your family get one step closer to reaching the objective. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let me go here. So back here. So God will develop the aim. You're going to see how it's all going to tie into it in a bit. God will develop the aim, right? Then the family has the objective is communicated to the family. So God says, this is the big aim. These are the smaller objectives. Maybe there's 1,000 or 3,000, 10,000 smaller objectives to make this big aim, to reach this big aim. Each family is going to be designated a particular objective, right? Then your family, which is here on the ancestral level, is going to then decide, okay, fine, what goals do we need to reach? Okay, fine, Usiabonga has got this goal. This is his goal that he needs to reach, right? Then what they will do, they will select itongo, which is best to fulfill the purpose and reach that goal. So they say, okay, fine, Usiabonga needs to reach that goal. Which of us amongst us has the spiritual wisdom and knowledge necessary for his job to become a craft, to serve purpose, and help him reach his goal? I hope that makes sense. Because you're going to begin to understand, because you need to understand this particular process, because that is the function of African culture. Because between the God level and ancestral level is African religion, as I spoke about 2 weeks ago. Between the ancestral level and the human level is African culture. So this level here, where the goal is communicated to us, and we on the right here as humans, in order for us to successfully successfully take our job, make it a craft so we can serve purpose and reach our goal, we need to successfully execute African culture. And by successfully executing African culture, we are putting ourselves in the best possible position spiritually to succeed. So I'm not saying, Uti, African, if you do everything well, you'll be successful. No, you want to put yourself in the best possible position spiritually for success. And to do that, you need African culture and the execution of African culture. Now you guys understand. Now I hoping you're beginning. So when you watch the lectures, guys, you need to piece the lectures together, because I've developed it in such a way that we are building on your level of understanding of African culture and African spirituality, and begin to piece it all together and piece your own identities and your own lives together. I just want to see check out some questions and answer some questions. Okay, I don't see any questions at the moment. Everything is just comments. Okay, let's carry on. Right. So today we're going to be looking at Imbeleko, Umhlonyane, and Umemulo. These are the three fundamentals. They set the foundation, right? When it comes to unlocking your full spiritual potential. Let's begin with Imbeleko. So Imbeleko is the reintroduction to Itong, and I'm going to explain to you why. A lot of people say no, we're introducing Noma Saibiga Ingane to Abadala. We're introducing the child to their ancestors, if one had translated into English. To say we're introducing technically is incorrect. It's a reintroduction to Itong, and I'm going to explain why I say it's a reintroduction. So what is it? Spiritually reintroducing Itongo to the other spiritual beings. This is done at the child's surname. So if meaning Wagam Kiza, Abagam Kiza are the ones responsible for Imbeleko Yam. If I was conceived out of wedlock, it would be Abagatuma that are responsible for Imbeleko Yam. A goat is, how is it done? It's simply taken that a goat is slaughtered in alignment with the gender. Ilalem Samo. And the following day, the child is going to be bathed and coated with inyongo or bile. If the child is conceived in wedlock, it'll wear on the right-hand side. If the child is conceived out of wedlock, he'll wear it on the left-hand side. Bagwet. And I want to say this now. Every single child deserves Imbeleko. 1. 2. There is no expiration date on Imbeleko. So if you realize that you're 50 years old and you're watching this right now and you've never had Imbeleko done, you can do Imbeleko for you at the age of 50. There is this notion that, and I have no idea where it comes from, I'm quite perplexed, that when the first child gets Imbeleko, then bathatha ingubo from the first child, and then bazombathisa lezi ezinye ingane ezilandelayo ekhaya. And they're going to use that as Imbeleko. Bagwethu. No. Imbeleko, a great analogy for Imbeleko is it's a spiritual ID card. It's an ID card, right? Now, I want you to go to your brother or your firstborn in the family and say, Mfana gets or dade. Ngicela unginikeze ID yakho, ngifuna ukuyovula i-bank account. Ngicela unginikeze ID yakho, ngifuna ukuyothenga imoto. It's not going to work, right? That's the same principle here. You cannot share Imbeleko. You cannot share Islwane. Ingane nengane needs to be introduced to Abadala or reintroduced to Abadala, right? Ngoba ingane nengane inethongo lakho. So I have no idea where it comes from, where you only do one Imbeleko yodwa ekhaya for the firstborn. No. What about the second and the thirdborn? The same way each person has their own ID card or ID book, right? Each person needs to have Imbeleko yabo. Khohlwanye lento ukuthi no, the firstborn and then you're going to share it. No, you can't share your brother's ID card. I can't use my sister's ID. I can't use my brother's ID. So in what world would it make sense ukuthi I shared the Imbeleko yabo? And I want you to read there why. Itongo needs to be reintroduced to Abadala. So that ngesikhathi mina ngiphahla ngibiza bakamkhize bayayazi le ngane yabo ukuthi le ngane le yakamkhize ingane yethu yangempela. Because if mina I share, in inverted commas, my brother's ingubo kamfowethu, but I have not done Imbeleko for me, ngizobe ngiphahla ngikhala kubadala bazothi ubani lo okhala kangaka, ubani lo, ngoba asimazi. Asikaze nje sizwe ukuthi kunengane ebizwa igama uSiyabonga. Do you understand why ingane needs Imbeleko? Let's hope. So what we find is that they're limited when this doesn't happen, that they're limited when it comes to love and relationships and their social relationships. They struggle to build ubudlelwane with abantu, and they really lack a sense of belonging. They tend to be insecure and they don't really desire for commitment. That's because they don't really, itongo labo hasn't been reintroduced. It hasn't been solidified. This is where I belong and this is where I come from and this is who I am. Do you understand? And I just want to explain why I call it a reintroduction. Okay. So basically, I hope you guys can see that on the right, there's the body, mind, spirit. And then this is on the right-hand side, we have our trifecta, right? We have our trifecta here. We have our trifecta all around here. I hope you can see. I'm just using a pointer here. This is our trifecta, okay? And then you have the spirit, itong, right? Remember what I said at the beginning. Amatong are going to sit, right, between one another, okay? They are going to sit between themselves and they're going to decide iliphi itongo elizohamba phambili lingene kulo mntwana. So which tongue is going to enter this child? Which tongue is the most appropriate, that is going to carry the necessary knowledge and wisdom in order for this child to fulfill their purpose and reach their goal? Then lel tongo is sent and enters the child, the individual spirit. Now, in order for us to communicate with abadala, we need to reintroduce in the form of Imbeleko. That's why we're not introducing. You can't introduce someone that's how do you introduce Itongo that comes from Amanyamatongo? You know, because Itongo comes from this group. So you're not introducing Itongo. You're reintroducing. And by reintroducing, you can see that is a cycle, right? So this cycle is now complete. This cycle is a cycle of spiritual communication, spiritual enlightenment, and spiritual growth. That is the first cycle. Hence, it is important that each child receives Imbeleko Yabo, because if each child doesn't receive Imbeleko Yabo, then some children, right, do not have this cycle in place. So by taking Itong, or by doing Imbeleko, right, you are saying, Nina bakamkhize, nansi ingane yenu. Do you see? Ngoba le ngane iqhamuka kubona. Lel thongo liqhamuka kubona. Okay? So we reintroduce it back to Amatongo, and then now what we've done by reintroducing, you've unlocked the lines of communication. The lines of knowledge and wisdom can now flow. So that mina mangphahla ebusuku, right? Itongo lam can go to abadala, seek answers, and come back to me and return. So do you see that cycle? There's a reason I'm choosing those arrows so that you can see it's a cycle. So umphahlo wam is ngithi badala babiza, right? Itongo lam can then go. I'm on the bottom line. I'm on the bottom red line. Follow my finger around. Bottom red line. Go to Amatongo, have a conversation with ingane, and then return at the top, return to us and feed us the information. So now without Imbeleko, you don't have this in place. And if you don't have this in place, how are you going to do everything else? Because this is the foundation. So the reintroduction is the first key. And if you don't have this cycle in place, then what happens is then everything, and it's discuss wenza umsebenzi for Itongo. How are you going to do umsebenzi for Itongo if initially Amatongo don't even know who this person is? This person hasn't been reintroduced. The cycle, the initial cycle of communication has not been established. I also want to answer some questions on Imbeleko. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, Okay, so someone's asking, what if this reintroduction is done, but akugezwa? Does it deem it null? Please can you clarify, but what do you mean, does it deem it null? Does it deem it null? Please clarify there. Okay. Okay, I just want to answer more questions. Yeah, so if the child was born where both parents were not married and the child went to Imbeleko Gabo Mama, later stage, the baby daddy then decides to shower and over the child. Is it possible Gabo daddy to do it? Yes, you are correct. Okay, so if I'm born out of wedlock and then my parents do Imbeleko, my mother's side of the family do Imbeleko for me. Ngesikhathi after ilobolo has been paid and inhlawulo has been paid, my father's side of the family must slaughter a goat for me, but bangenzela imbeleko to reintroduce me again, right? The reintroduction must be done on the father's side of the family. Hope that makes sense. Umgcagco was actually a form of imbeleko, actually, right? Hence, kuthelwa ngenyongo, because it's a form of reintroduction. So yeah, you are correct. You're definitely correct. Baby daddy's side must also do imbeleko for ingane. Okay. Good day. What causes umbango? Okay. What causes umbango is when you're using the incorrect surname. That's what causes umbango. Or otherwise you're using the right surname, or you're born out of wedlock, but kunekwama that you meant to take. But the main reason why is you're using the incorrect surname. So ashishukuthi, when you're born out of wedlock, inhlawulo was not paid, ilobolo was not paid, but ngenkani usebenzisa isibongo sikababa wakho. That is when umbango. That's when umbango is caused. Or alternatively, excuse me, ilobolo is paid, inhlawulo is paid, but imbeleko is not done for you, but your mother's side of the family did a goat to release you. So you have been released, but you have not been welcomed into your father's side of the family, but you're taking their surname nonetheless. That's when you can also have umbango. I hope that makes sense. Can you use one goat for all the kids if you do Imbeleko? No. You cannot use the same. Umuntu nomuntu has to have their own goat unless you are twins. Twins must share a goat because ba umuntu yedwa. Technically, twins are one person. Twins are one person. The only people that can share a goat are twins. Otherwise, everyone else ekhaya umuntu nomuntu akabe nembuzi yakhe. No, and you can't do them all on the same day. That's not a problem. That's fine. You can, if you have 5 kids and you're only realizing now that they need to have Imbeleko done, you can do it all on the same day. That's not a problem. But each of them must have their. If you have 10 kids, they must buy 10 goats. If you have 2 kids, then you must buy 2 goats. Hope that makes sense. Okay. Here's another one. Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't want to skip questions here. Sorry. So mkhulu, if awukaze wenze imbeleko, but you have received intel from your guys' ancestors warning the family of inhlambuluko. Okay, so first things first, Skali, please can you do imbeleko? That's the first thing you need to do. You need to do imbeleko. That's the reason why you're getting the warning of inhlambuluko, is because you haven't done imbeleko. Imbeleko needs to be done. I don't know if you're speaking about yourself, but Imbeleko needs to be done. That's why this person's having dreams or visions of inhlambuluko, because Imbeleko, but before inhlambuluko can be done, Imbeleko needs to be taken care of first. And remember what I said in the beginning, Imbeleko, guys, you can be 8 years old when Imbeleko. But Imbeleko does not, I cook Imbeleko. Okay? Here's another one. Sawubona, ngicela ukubuza, njengomuntu oseshadile ngingayenzelwa kumuntu ohlolayo ngaphandle komyeni. This is difficult. This is tricky. Because okay. So Tobile, I hope you're still here. Ngicela ungiphendule. Mawuthi usushadile, ushade kanjani? Ngokwesintu noma wenza white wedding noma ugcagcile kwalotsholwa? Ngicela ungichazele. I just want to know how you were married ngaphambi kokuthi ngiphendule. Okay. What if the reintroduction is done, but awugezwanga ngenyongo? Does it mean this needs to be redone? Yes, it does need to be redone. See, it's symbolic. Okay, let me say this now in the beginning. But wait, I am not saying so I'm speaking now to the vendors, Pedis, Tswanas, the non-Zulus or non-Gunis. I'm using Zulu culture as an example of how things should, as Imbeleko, how we do Imbeleko. When if umpedi, go home to ugogo nomkhulu and say ma bab gogo mkhulu. How do we do Imbeleko ngoba thina mapedi or thina masuthu? How do we do Imbeleko? In the event you are a pioneer, you have no source of how the family did it, then you can follow Indlela Zulu, because at least then you have done something better than nothing for Abadala. So that's the only reason why I'm just giving this detailed process. Okay. Zulu, Mazulu, yes, I would say redo it, because ukuthelwa ngenyongo is the equivalent of umgcaco. Because remember, ukuthelwa ngenyongo is symbolic, ukuthi uyangeniswa. Ukuthelwa ngenyongo emzimbeni is for itongo, not necessarily yourself. So what I would do before jumping and getting into Imbeleko and whatnot, ngicela uphahla kubadala ubacela ukuthi nina bakaZulu siyazi ukuthi ngesikhathi kwenziwa imbeleko we did ABCD, azange sisebenzise inyongo. Ngicela ukuthi nisichazele ukuthi siphinde futhi lo msebenzi noma senze njani. So you don't even need to come for a consultation. Phahla cela abadala ukuthi, do we need to actually repeat it? But I would say yes, because you didn't have that symbolic process. But ngicela ukuthi uphahla kuqala. Okay. Excuse me, guys. I'm just trying to get through the questions here. Let's see. Where was I? Okay, let me take you through the process of Imbeleko. Okay. Step 1, right? Where let's say we have one child. Okay, let's say I have one child. My child was born. Thina Zulu, we do Imbeleko at the age of 1. I don't know about other cultures. I think I might closer do it at 6 months, other do it at 3 months. But anyway, if I have a boy child, ngizothenga imbuzi yomfana, yesilisa. So I'm going to buy a male goat. I'm going to take this goat. Mina angikwazi ukushisa impepho emsamo, ubaba esaphila. So ubaba wami uzongishisela impepho, akhulume emsamo for my son or my daughter. Shisa impepho, akhulume to introduce this child, assuming the child is in wedlock, right? And nesibongo sami esifanele, okay? To abadala. Bahlaba imbuzi. Leyo mbuzi ihlinzwe, ilale emsamo. It's going to sleep emsamo. The following morning, ubaba uzovuka, asike isiphandla for umfana wami, but because he was conceived in wedlock, he's going to wear it on the right-hand side. Where he conceived out of wedlock and the mother side of the family was doing Imbeleko for him, he would put it on the left-hand side. Okay? That's how it goes. And then after that, inyama iyadliwa, ningamema abantu, kudliwa iplate lesipuni, udliwe spoon, and on top of that, you can have bride meat, you can have inyama ephekiwe, and that's it. That's all Imbeleko is. Imbeleko is a very simple, straightforward procedure. You have a goat, you slaughter a goat, depending on the gender of the child. In or out of wedlock determines whether his pancreas sits on the left or the right-hand side. Avuka ekuseni, athelwe ngenyongo, lenganye ithelwe ngenyongo as well. Ihlale for that day. For that day, after ukuthelwe ngenyongo, ahlale naye lo nyongo for at least alale naye for a day, for a night. The next thing, asengageza-ke futhi ageza inyongo and everything else, aqhubeke nempilo. Leyo ngane has Imbeleko done for them. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's clarified and everything. Okay, there's quite a few questions. I'm worried about. Okay, guys, I'm worried about time, so I'm just gonna keep going. And okay, yes, regarding the Q&A. So what we're gonna do for the question and answer session, we're gonna do it over the weekend. So on a Saturday and a Sunday, we're gonna have 2 Q&A sessions at the end of the first series of education. So there's going to be 12 episodes or 12 educational talks, right? After those 12, we're going to have 2, if need be, 3 Q&As based on all 12. Okay. So the idea behind that is so that we don't have to keep going back and forth and do another Q&A and it's another lecture coming up and so on and so forth. So at the end of this entire series, on week 12, well, this is episode 10. At the end of episode 12, we're going to have 2 Q&As. Okay. Right. Let's just answer a few more questions. Thokoza Mkhulu, what is the difference between umsebenzi, ukubonga nomsebenzi wembeleko? How does one go and how does one go about doing umsebenzi wembeleko? Okay, so Siyabonga, I just explained how to do umsebenzi wembeleko at the moment. Umsebenzi wokubonga, you also do a goat, but it was actually done for me when I was 14 years old, where they did umsebenzi for ukubonga mina. And instead of doing 1 goat, because I'm a male, they did 2 goats. So they did a goat, they did a female and a male goat, ukubonga izalukwazi nokubonga amakhehla, right? Same process, pretty much. The only difference is you don't, indaba yokuthelwa inyongo ayikho indaba yokuthelwa inyongo, because you're not introducing anybody to anything. So ukuthela inyongo is when someone's being introduced into the family or reintroduced into the family. That's the main difference. And then ngagqoka isiphandla on my left, and then the goat, the female goat, I wore on my left, and the male goat I wore on my right for in terms of iphandla. So that's how umsebenzi wokubonga goes about. Exact same procedure. Obviously, the words change that you speak in Samo. You will be saying ukuthi cha noma khize sifuna ukuthatha isikhathi ukuthi sibonge le ngane, sibonge ukuthi nasikhethe as abazali ukuthi nisibusise nale ngane empilweni zethu, sithi siyabonga amakhizi nina izalukwazi namakhehla nansi isilwane. Do you see? So the only difference, leave out inyongo and obviously change the words. That's the main difference between ukubonga. I'm assuming you're speaking about ukubonga ingane, because we're speaking about children here. I'm assuming that. Okay, kuyenzeka ukuthi ingane yenzelwe imbeleko ekhaya kamama bese ikhishwe ngesilwane ingeniswe ekhaya kababa iphinde. Okay, sengiphendule lo mbuzo bonga, kodwa mhlambe bawungekho msanda ukungena. Yebo bhuti, qinisile. Uma ingane yenzelwe imbeleko kakhabo nina, bese ubaba wengane ihlawule ilobo lingane, ingane ikhishwe ngesilwane noma imbuzi kakhabo nina. Okay, ngesikhathi ingeniswa ngale kakhabo kababa baba, right? Kumele ukuthi imbeleko yenziwa futhi ngithi ingane yangeniswa manje. So Ubonga is asking the same thing I said before. You can have 2 imbeleko being done for you twice in your lifetime. If your mother's family do it, this is assuming you're born out of wedlock. If your mother's family do it for you, and then you leave your mother's family, and when you enter your father's family, you're doing imbeleko for you on that side as well. I hope that makes sense. Next question. Mama no baba bashadile. Yini okwenza imbeleko kubo kamama? Okay, Dutu, please can you give me a bit more clarity on so you're saying mama no baba bashadile, right? The surname you're using now, Kunene, whose surname is it? Surname is it? Is it your mother's surname? Is it your father's surname? When you say they're married, are they married to each other? Are they married? Yeah, I just need a bit more information so that I can better answer your question. I hope I haven't missed out any questions. Guys, please, if I missed your question, here we go. Here's another question. Is it true that if you're the firstborn and married and the child
No. So is it true that if you are the firstborn in marriage and that child kumele yenzelwe imbeleko ekhaya kamalume ba? No. If you're conceived in wedlock, right? Whether you're the firstborn or the lastborn, the only family that can do Imbeleko for you is the family which your mother is married into. So the only family that can do the Imbeleko for me is Bagam Kiza, because mina ngazala inside of wedlock. Bagam Kiza, right? This thing go to the firstborn needs to also have Imbeleko done from the Kamalume. No, they can't, because the child is born in wedlock. In the event the child is born outside of wedlock, then Umalume would be responsible for Imbeleko. I hope that answers your question. Sure, there's a lot of questions, but I like it. I like the questions, guys. It means we're engaging, which is good. It's good. Okay. Right. So, if a child is born, then yashawula. Ilobola then yenzelwa kababa, not kamama. What happens then? Okay, hold on, let me read properly. So, if a child was born, then yashawula. Ilobola then yenzelwa kababa, not kamama. What happens there? I'm just trying to understand when you say ilobola then yenzelwa kababa, not kamama. I'm not sure, because like lao shawula khona is where ilobola is supposed to happen as well. So I'm struggling to understand the question, Timmy, because if ushawula from abagaduma, therefore ilobola must happen from abagaduma as well for the child, right? I hope that makes sense. Just, yeah, can you just give me a bit more information? Because if uhlawula happened at the mother's side of the family, right, and then ilobola happened by the father's side of the family and the mother's side wasn't included, that makes ilobola null and void, and leongane is still ingane kamawak and the mother's family. Therefore, the mother's family is responsible for Imbeleko yamntwana, if I'm understanding it correctly. Okay, so abantwana more than one, let's say 3. Mabekhishwa kubo mama, bafakwe kubo baba. Does that mean each child must have their own go-to animal? Most definitely, Fortune Ratebe. Each child must have their own goat. The same way each child has their own birth certificate and own ID, each child must also have their own goat and their own animal. Okay. I want to power on with the lecture, but I also feel like these questions are very important because each one is different. So please just bear with me. Okay, so I'm picking this one in particular because it's very important, and some people are in this situation, but they don't know. If ulongwe, i.e. the mother cheated in the marriage, and azange wageza umuzi, where is one supposed to do imbeleko? Okay. If ulongwe and umawako, like gane khona umawako, there's only one surname you can have, and that is the surname la umawako egane khona. Because umawaki, you can't take your mother's maiden surname because umawako sephumile ekhaya. You can't take your biological father's surname because your mother's not married there. Therefore, what needs to happen is 1, kumele ukuthi lihlazo ligezwe, and then 2, the fathers, like gana khona umawako, they must be responsible for imbeleko yakho. You see, this is what I was saying in the beginning of this whole class, and I'm speaking to men particularly. Do not pick and choose when we want to apply culture. We love to say ukuthi umuntu wesifazana must begezela when if you have a child outside of the home, she must stay with you and stay married abegezela. But in the same breath, if you're going to keep that energy, you must maintain your energy that don't pick and choose when to apply culture, because if your wife cheats and she falls pregnant by another man, that child ingane yenu, and it must have the surname. And Nina, you must do everything for leyo ngane. Imbeleko, Umhlonyane Umemulo,
And everything must only happen at that family. So that's what I gotta say on that. I hope that answers your question, Wenoni. It's tough, but there's only one family that can do Imbeleko for you. And that is where your mother married. Okay. Okay. Okay, there's quite a few questions. I'm going to take the last question. Okay, I think we're going to run out of time today. So I think I'm going to have to do a part 2 next week, Sunday. I really think we're going to run out of time. But that's okay. It's not. We're always here to help. We're always here to learn. Okay, let me carry on with the lecture so that we can power through. Okay. Right. So now we're speaking about Umhlonyane. Umhlonyane this is more important than Imbeleko because this is the initiator of spiritual maturation, right? In the beginning, we're talking about introducing. Now we're talking about maturing. And Umhlonyane is critical because as one physically matures, right? Remember what I said in the beginning, here. Remember what I said here. We need indigenous spiritual knowledge and wisdom, right? But in order for us to get that, the conversation that is taking place between itongo lako and amatongo and what knowledge and wisdom is being fed into you needs to change. As you mature and as you grow up, right, you need to be given access to knowledge and wisdom for a mature person. Okay, so what we find with people that don't have Umhlonyane done is that they are limited in their careers and academics post-matric because that conversation, this person is grown, they are mature, they have gone from being a child to a young adult. And the reason why I'm saying Imbeleko is more important than Umhlonyane because before you become an adult, you go through pubescence. Right? And in order to survive pubescence and become an adult, you need different kinds of knowledge and wisdom. So to not do Umhlonyane is limiting, right, a rich knowledge and wisdom at different level and at different depth, okay, that you are not being allowed to access. That is why we talk about spiritual maturation matching physical maturation. Okay, so what is it? It's a ritual to celebrate and mark the first biological or physical sign of a growth of a child, from childhood into pubescence. Okay, how is it done? So a lot of the time people confuse Umhlonyane and Umemulo, and we kind of blur the lines and things filter into each other. Umhlonyane is typically done for a girl, Tomba, right? But it can also be done for a boy. Should amatongo deem it so, itongo can say sifuna imbuzi for lomntwana. And it can also be done for a boy. Okay. But for intombazane, what would happen is when she has her first menstruation or her first period, she'll be taken inside by mama basekaya, nezalgwazi, and then it's a very significant event in that they will then consult her and tell, okay, look, this is what it means. This is what it signifies. This is what it means for your future. This is what it means, what you can and cannot. So it's a guiding and counseling period. A bit of a sidebar, I think that this is possibly one of the greatest opportunities where we can introduce menstrual education for both men and boys, in that during this consultation period, we can begin the conversation around menstrual education and menstrual health. That's why I think it's so important for us to execute African cultures, because it presents opportunities for us to have these kind of conversations. And Umhlonyane is not, I repeat, it is not umsebenzi done to let the world know that my daughter is young and she's fertile and ripe for the picking. No, that is not what it signifies. It's about itongo. You're doing two things. One, wazisa ithongo namathongo ukuthi le ntombazane isiyakhula manje. Give this child the resources, the knowledge, and the wisdom necessary for her to move on to the next stage of her life. That's step number 1. Step number 2, ukubonga abadala for keeping this child alive and well and healthy up until now. Because remember, emandulo, we didn't have, birthdays, which, on this day, woo, birthday, celebration. No. So we had markers. And this was a visible marker. So those are the 2 primary purposes of Umhlonyane. And I hate this notion that Umhlonyane is like, no, you're letting people know that your daughter is fertile and ripe for the picking. No, that's not the case. This child is grown, she is matured, badala. Equip her with the resources and the knowledge and wisdom she needs for the next stage of her life. Now, if you don't have that in your life and you are missing that out and you don't have Umhlonyane done, how can you expect then for Umemulo to work out if you don't have the foundation of pubescence? How are you expecting for blessings in adulthood? So now what people, when some people refuse or leave out Umhlonyane, okay, you are spiritually stunting your child's growth. And by spiritually stunting your child's growth, you are suppressing them and oppressing them. What's law 6? The spiritual suppression or oppression of another is detrimental to your own spiritual liberation. That is why, so how it is done? So after this consultation, after a few days, she's inside, they'll consult her, they'll speak to her, and they'll let her know what it means. A goat is going to be slaughtered with an alignment of agenda. It's then going to be eaten by everyone in the community in the evening. And it must be finished. Everything must be finished. The goat, nothing can remain behind. That's the one thing about Umhlonyane. Everything must finish. Everything. Everything. And the goat's eaten in the evening. That's how AmaZulu do it. I'm not sure about other ethnic groups. Please do share if you know how ethnic groups do it. But the significance of that, like I said, after the itongo has been reintroduced, right, we now need to begin to mature. Now it's going to begin to mature. But you cannot do Umhlonyane without doing Imbeleko, because angithi tina, we're saying to itongo with Umhlonyane, this child has now reached a stage in her life where she needs knowledge, a different set of knowledge and wisdom. But how are you going to give her that if you don't know her spiritually, because she hasn't been reintroduced? That is why Imbeleko must happen first. Then when the child is 13, 14, maybe it's in the sweet 16, you can then do Umhlonyane. Okay, so guys, look, we've run out of time. So I'm going to use the last 10 minutes for questions. Then what I'm going to do is we're going to have to just carry on with the lecture next week, Sunday. Or I'll ask, maybe we'll do a bit of a poll. Yeah, I think Sunday is a good time because during the week people are at work, and yeah, it's not going to work out. So I think let's just do next week Sunday. That means instead of 12 episodes, we're going to have 13 because this did take a little longer than I anticipated. But anyway, let me just show you what I mean before I take the questions. This is the last slide. So you can see, by virtue of the fact that the arrows are different colors, that's because you've unlocked a different level of knowledge and wisdom, right? So now as the body matures, okay, senzela itongo umsebenzi of Umhlonyane. We're saying to amatongo, now when the spirit itongo goes back to amanye amatongo, it's going to say, yabona ke manje, I have been marked and tainted as someone coming from a body which is mature. I have been marked and tainted spiritually, coming from a body which is entering the next stage of its life. Bless me with the knowledge and wisdom and the resources necessary for the next stage of my life, which is going to get me one step closer to reaching and fulfilling my purpose. Then itongo can go back, or amatongo can then feed itongo different levels, different knowledge and wisdom. I hope I'm making sense. So basically, always Umhlonyane, right? It's kind of like spiritually marking itongo lako, saying, I am now ready for new knowledge, for new resources, for new wisdom. Give me that, because I'm going into a different stage of my life. And to leave that, and this is the second cycle or circle. Do you see? Because Imbeleko has been done and we've got that cycle going, we are now enabling and we can now do the second cycle or the second circle. Okay, so guys, it's going to end here in terms of the lectures. I'm just going to use the last 10 minutes or so for questions, Q&A, and I'm going to answer any other questions with the last 10 minutes that we have. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back to where I was. Okay. Okay, if ingane yahlawula kwaba ne-one cow for ilobola, kumele yini isebenzise isibongo sikababa? No. Inhlawulo does not mean surname change. Inhlawulo plus lobola plus a goat to release the child and Imbeleko to receive the child is surname change. I hope that answers your question. You need all those things to happen in order for a surname change to take place. Okay, Thokoza. Kenzeka yini if uzalelwe emshadweni but izinto eziningi zifuna ekhaya komama? Like when you get married, kumele uye khona and babike emsamo almost everything nje if kungenzeka kuvele kubhede nje izinto. It can happen. It can happen. In that when you're married, abantu that can hold down ibhizinisi lenu nekhaya lenu can be abakakhabo mama. Because remember, umshado is about amatonga as much as it's about you and him. It can definitely happen. Like that a couple mama they need. But the reason Bashak is another daughter is because the family is going to help them and then they are going to help the family in return. So it does happen. It does happen. Can we not have this discussion over Zoom so we can interact live and ask questions but limited to the allowed number? So the thing is with Zoom, Zoom I think is limited to about, it's limited with time and it's also limited with the number of participants. Yeah, it's limited with participants and limited with time, and it's also got a couple of also Zoom has cybersecurity issues at the moment which haven't been sorted out. So our IT team at the moment is just not happy with. Initially, we thought we were going to use Zoom. I also thought we were going to use Zoom, and then our IT guys said no, we're not using Zoom because of security issues. So I don't know. I'll ask them, but this is a bond. Okay, I just want to answer questions. Sorry guys, I'm just answering questions that are related to today's topic. Okay. Okay, here we go. Are there any rituals that are supposed to be done for Ingane that was born because of rape? Like maybe Ukezingane. Okay, I want to actually do a podcast on this. I think let me do that. Let me do a recording on speaking about that. Sure. Okay, guys, look. Thank you very much for taking the time today, for joining us. I know we ran out of time. I just really wanted to spend there were a lot of questions and I wanted to answer the questions as best as possible because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to these rituals. So please join us next week, Sunday, and we're going to carry on again from this point in the lecture. Please keep your questions in mind. If you can copy paste them from here onto the side somewhere, into like a notes tab or whatever, so we can keep them, and I'll definitely answer them again next week, Sunday. Thank you very much and have a lovely Sunday evening. Look after yourself and stay safe during this lockdown. Good night.